was this place to Elvis? What did it mean to him?
This was home. Home, I mean, to the highest limits of, or how the highest, like, how could I say?
At 80, Priscilla Presley has finally opened up about one of the most personal and mysterious parts of her life, why she never remarried after losing Elvis. For decades, fans have wondered if her heart ever truly healed, or if anyone could have replaced the king in her eyes. Through years of fame, heartbreak, and silence, Priscilla carried her story with quiet grace. But now, she's ready to reveal the truth behind her lifelong decision, a truth that speaks and time itself could never erase. And her confession changes everything. What did she really confess? Stay with us. The woman behind the silence. At 80 years old, Priscilla Presley moves through life with a grace that seems almost otherworldly. Her face, still beautiful after all these years, carries the wisdom of someone who has lived through extraordinary joy and devastating loss. She speaks softly, smiles gently, and holds herself with a quiet dignity that commands respect. But there is something else about her, something that has puzzled people for decades. An air of mystery that hangs around her like morning mist, never quite lifting, never fully revealing what lies beneath. She has been unmarried for over 50 years. 5 decades of living alone despite being surrounded by fame, fortune, and endless attention. Men have admired her. Opportunities have presented themselves. The world has watched and wondered year after year why someone so remarkable would choose such solitude. At first, people whispered that she was still mourning, that the loss of Elvis Presley had been too great, too painful to move past. But as the years turned into decades, the questions grew louder. Was it really just grief, or was there something deeper, something more complex keeping her heart locked away? Some believed she still loved him, that despite everything that happened between them, despite the divorce and the distance and the pain, Elvis remained the only man who ever truly held her heart. Others thought perhaps she had been hurt too badly to ever trust again, that loving someone as broken and complicated as Elvis had left scars too deep to heal. But Priscilla never explained. She never defended her choices. She simply lived her life, raised her children, built her career, and walked forward with that same quiet strength that had carried her through so many storms. The world changed around her. Generations came and went. Technology transformed everything. New stars rose and fell. Fashion evolved. Music shifted. But Priscilla remained constant, as if she existed slightly outside of time itself. Friends noticed it. Family saw it. The way she seemed frozen in one chapter of her life, unable or unwilling to turn the page. She attended events, smiled for cameras, managed Graceland, spoke about Elvis's legacy with pride and love. But when the lights went off and the crowds disappeared, she was alone. Always alone. People close to her saw the sadness she hid so well, the way her eyes would distant when certain songs played, the way she would touch her wedding ring even though she had not been married in decades, the way she spoke about the past with such vivid detail, as if it had happened yesterday instead of half a century ago. There was a weight she carried, invisible to most, but unmistakable to those who truly knew her, a burden that grew heavier with each passing year, yet she never set it down. She could have written a tell-all book. She could have sold her story to the highest bidder. She could have used her pain for profit, her memories for fame. But she did not. She protected what she and Elvis had shared, even when the world demanded answers, even when people accused her of living in the past, even when they said she was wasting her life holding onto a ghost. She remained silent, loyal to a love that most people could not understand. But now, after so many years of questions and speculation, after decades of keeping her truth locked away, something has shifted. Perhaps it is age, perhaps it is wisdom, perhaps it is simply the right time. Whatever the reason, Priscilla Presley has decided that the world deserves to know. Not the rumors, not the guesses, but the real story. The truth about why she stayed alone, the truth about what Elvis meant to her, the truth about a love that refused to die. Now, after so many years, Priscilla finally decides to break the silence. Her confession begins with the memory of the man who changed everything, Elvis Presley. the girl who met the king. She was only 14 years old when she first saw him. Priscilla Beaulieu was a shy girl with soft features and curious eyes, living in Germany because her stepfather was stationed there with the Air Force. Her life was simple, predictable, far removed from anything glamorous. She went to school, spent time with her family, and dreamed small dreams like most girls her age. But then, one September evening in 1959, everything changed. She was invited to a party, and there, in a room filled with people, stood Elvis Presley. He was 24 years old, already a legend, already loved by millions. But in that moment, he was not the king of rock and roll. He was a soldier dressed in uniform, far from home, carrying a loneliness that fame could not fill. His mother had passed away just a year before, and the loss had left a deep wound in him. He smiled. He charmed everyone around him, but those who looked closely could see the sadness hiding behind his eyes. And when he saw Priscilla, something shifted. She was different, quiet, innocent. She did not throw herself at him like others did. She simply stood there, unsure of what to say. They began to talk. At first it was polite, careful, but as the night went on, something unspoken passed between them. He asked about her life, her family, her thoughts. She listened as he spoke about his mother, about how much he missed home, about how strange it felt to be so famous yet so alone. There was no performance in his voice that night, just honesty. And Priscilla, young as she was, felt something she could not quite name. It was not just admiration, it was connection. After that night, he invited her back, and then again, and again. Their meetings became a quiet ritual. He would send a car to pick her up, and she would arrive at his house where they would sit and talk for hours. They did not go out much. They did not need to. He found peace in her presence, and she found a world she never knew existed. He played music for her, shared his fears, told her stories about his childhood. She listened wide-eyed, absorbing every word. Slowly, gently, without either of them planning it, she became his safe place. But Priscilla was still a child in many ways. She had school the next morning. She had parents who worried. She had a life that did not yet belong to her. And Elvis, for all his charm and power, was careful with her. He did not rush. He did not push. He simply let her be there, and in return, she gave him the one thing he could not find anywhere else, a love that had no conditions. Months passed. Their bond deepened. He called her his little girl. She called him hers. But then, his time in Germany came to an end. He was going back to America, back to the bright lights and screaming crowds. And Priscilla, standing at the edge of her teenage years, had to decide if she was ready to follow him into a world she did not understand. She left Germany not long after. She left her childhood, her safety, her innocence. She stepped onto a plane, uncertain of what destiny was pulling her toward. The fairy tale was about to begin, but no one told her how much it would cost her heart. Living in the shadow of the king. Priscilla was barely 16 when she moved to Memphis. She left behind her family, her friends, everything familiar, and stepped into a world that felt like a dream wrapped in velvet and gold. Graceland was not just a house, it was a kingdom. Enormous gates, sprawling rooms, chandeliers that sparkled like stars. Everything about it screamed luxury and power. But beneath all that beauty, there were rules. So many rules. Elvis had built this world, and everyone who entered it had to follow his rhythm, his schedule, his mood. At first, it felt magical. She was living with the most famous man on earth, surrounded by people who adored him, protected by walls that kept the world out. But soon, the magic began to fade. Elvis was rarely home. He was always somewhere else, on tour, on a movie set, in a recording studio. And when he was gone, Priscilla was left alone in that big, empty mansion. She was too young to go out freely, too watched to live like a normal girl. The press followed her everywhere. Cameras clicked whenever she stepped outside. People whispered about her, judged her, wondered if she was good enough for him. She had no real friends her age. The people around her were his friends, his employees, his family. She smiled when she was supposed to smile. She dressed the way he wanted her to dress. She stayed up late because he liked to stay up late, even though she had school the next morning. Her life was no longer her own. It belonged to him, to his world, to the image they had to maintain. And though she loved him deeply, truly, there were nights when she lay awake and felt the weight of her loneliness pressing down on her chest. Still, she never complained. She believed in him. She believed in their love. She told herself that this was the price of being with someone extraordinary. And when he came home, when he looked at her with those gentle eyes and held her close, all the loneliness melted away. In those moments, she felt like the most important person in the world. But those moments were fleeting. Fame was a hungry beast, and it always pulled him back. Years passed like this. She grew older, more beautiful, more poised. But inside, she was still that young girl trying to hold on to something that kept slipping through her fingers. And then one day, Elvis asked her to marry him. It was not a grand proposal, not the kind you see in movies, but it was real. And for Priscilla, it was everything. She thought this was the moment that would change everything. That marriage would finally make her feel secure, loved, seen. They married in Las Vegas on May 1st, 1967. The ceremony was quick, almost rushed. It took place in a hotel suite with only a few people present. She wore a beautiful white dress, her hair perfectly styled, her smile bright. The photos looked perfect, but behind the scenes there were whispers. Some said Elvis had been pressured into it. Others believed it was just another performance, another image to sell to the world. Priscilla tried not to listen. She wanted to believe this was the beginning of their forever. For a while it felt like it could be. They played house, they laughed together, they dreamed about the future. And then, 9 months later, their daughter was born. Lisa Marie arrived on February 1st, 1968, and for the first time in years, Priscilla felt a sense of purpose beyond being Elvis's wife. She was a mother now, and Elvis, despite all his chaos, was a loving father. He adored that little girl. He held her gently, sang to her, showered her with toys and affection. In those quiet moments, Priscilla could see the man she fell in love with, the tender, vulnerable boy who just wanted to be loved. But fatherhood could not save him. Elvis was battling demons that no one could see. The pressures of fame had twisted him into someone he did not recognize. He took pills to stay awake, pills to fall asleep, pills to perform, pills to forget. He surrounded himself with people who said yes to everything, who never challenged him, who fed his illusions. And Priscilla, no matter how hard she tried, could not reach him anymore. She begged him to slow down, to take care of himself, to spend more time with her and Lisa Marie. But he was too far gone, trapped in a cycle he could not break. And slowly, painfully, Priscilla realized that love alone could not save their marriage. She could not fix him. She could not carry the weight of his pain and her own. She had to choose, stay and lose herself completely, or leave and try to find the person she used to be. Leaving him was not about falling out of love. It was about surviving it, the pain of letting go. The decision did not come suddenly. It built slowly, like water filling a cup until it finally spilled over. Priscilla had tried everything. She had been patient, understanding, supportive. She had waited through the lonely nights, the broken promises, the moments when he looked at her but did not really see her. She had hoped that one day he would wake up and remember the girl he fell in love with in Germany. But that day never came. And finally, after years of living in the shadow of a man she could no longer reach, Priscilla made the hardest choice of her life. She decided to leave. It was not anger that pushed her away, it was exhaustion. A deep, soul-crushing exhaustion that came from trying to hold together something that was falling apart. She was only 27 years old, but she felt ancient. She had spent her entire youth inside Graceland's walls, molding herself into what he needed, what the world expected. And in the process, she had lost herself completely. She did not know who she was anymore outside of being Elvis Presley's wife. She did not know what she liked, what she wanted, what dreams she might have buried somewhere deep inside. She longed for freedom, for space to breathe, for the chance to discover her own identity. On February 23, 1972, she told him she was leaving. He did not scream. He did not beg. He just looked at her with those sad, tired eyes and nodded. Deep down, he understood. But understanding did not make it hurt any less. He was confused, heartbroken, lost. He still loved her. He had always loved her. But he also knew he had failed her. He had let fame, pills, and his own demons destroy the one pure thing in his life. And now she was walking away, and he had no one to blame but himself. Their divorce was finalized on October 9, 1973. But even after the papers were signed, even after they were no longer husband and wife, they remained connected. He still called her late at night when the world felt too heavy. He still asked for her advice, her comfort, her presence. She was the one person who truly knew him, who had seen him at his worst and still cared. And Priscilla, despite everything, could not turn her back on him. She answered his calls. She listened. She reminded him that he was loved, even when he could not love himself. There was one moment, near the end, that she would carry with her forever. It was a quiet evening, just the two of them. No cameras, no crowds, no pretending. He held her close, his arms wrapped around her like he was afraid to let go. Neither of them said much, they did not need to. In that embrace there was everything, all the love, all the pain, all the years they had shared. It was goodbye, though neither of them wanted to say it out loud. And when she finally pulled away, she looked into his eyes one last time and saw the boy from Germany, the one who had been lonely and searching for someone to understand him. She wished she could save him, but she knew she could not. On August 16, 1977, the phone rang. Priscilla answered, and the voice on the other end told her something that did not feel real. Elvis was gone, dead at 42. Her mind refused to accept it. Just days ago, he had been alive. Struggling, yes, tired, yes, but alive. And now, suddenly, he was not. The world stopped. Time blurred. She stood there holding the phone, unable to move, unable to breathe, unable to process the fact that the man who had shaped her entire existence was no longer in it. Memories flooded back like a tidal wave, their first meeting, his laugh, the way he used to look at her when no one else was watching, their arguments, their reconciliations, the birth of their daughter, the dreams they had whispered to each other in the dark. It all came rushing back, overwhelming her, drowning her in grief she did not know how to carry. The world mourned. Millions of people cried, sent flowers, gathered at Graceland's gates. But for Priscilla, this was not about a celebrity dying. This was personal. This was the man who had defined her heart, who had been her first love, her husband, the father of her child. This was the person she had spent years trying to save, only to watch him slip away. And now he was gone, and there was nothing she could do to bring him back. She had to stay strong. Lisa Marie was only 9 years old, devastated, confused. Priscilla held her daughter close and forced herself not to fall apart. But at night, when the world was quiet, she let herself feel it. The unbearable weight of loss, the guilt, the love that had nowhere to go. From that moment, love was never the same again. The men who tried to love her. After Elvis passed away, the world expected Priscilla to move on. She was still young, still beautiful, still full of life. Surely someone would come along and help her heal. Surely she would find love again, and in some ways she tried. Over the years, there were men who entered her life, good men, successful men, men who admired her strength, her grace, her quiet elegance. They took her to dinners, made her laugh, tried to show her that happiness could exist beyond the shadow of Graceland. But something always felt wrong. There was Michael Edwards, a model and businessman who came into her life in the late 1970s. He was charming and attentive, and for a while Priscilla thought maybe this could work. But as time passed, she realized he was not the man she thought he was. The relationship ended painfully, leaving her more guarded than before. Then came Marco Garibaldi, an entrepreneur and writer. They were together for over 20 years, from 1984 to 2006. They even had a son together, Navarone, born in 1987. On paper, it seemed like a stable, loving partnership, but they never married. They never made it official. And eventually, even that quiet companionship faded away. There were others too, brief connections, moments that flickered and then disappeared, but none of them could reach the place inside her that still belonged to Elvis. It was not that these men were not good enough. It was that they were not him. They did not know the girl she had been in Germany. They did not understand the years she spent trying to hold together a marriage that was falling apart. They saw her beauty, her fame, her poise. But they did not see the woman who still carried a ghost in her heart. Every relationship felt like an echo, a faint reminder of something that could never be repeated. She would sit across from a man at dinner, smile at his jokes, listen to his stories, and still feel utterly alone. Because no matter how kind he was, no matter how much he tried, he was not the one who had defined her heart. He was not the one who had called her in the middle of the night just to hear her voice. He was not the one whose death had shattered her world. Priscilla began to realize something she had been avoiding for years. She was not searching for new love, she was protecting the old one. Every time someone got too close, every time a relationship started to feel real, a wall went up inside her. She could not let anyone in, not fully, not the way she had let Elvis in. Because loving someone that deeply, that completely, had cost her everything. And she could not bear to go through that kind of loss again. So she stayed alone. Not because she wanted to punish herself, not because she was bitter or afraid, but because her heart, despite all the years that had passed, still refused to move on. It was as if some invisible thread still connected her to him, and no matter how far she walked, she could not break free. She whispered to herself one quiet evening, staring out at the world that had moved on without her. I did not choose to stay alone. My heart simply refused to move on. Yet, after years of silence, the world still demanded an answer. Why never remarry? The truth finally revealed. At 80 years old, Priscilla Presley finally decides to speak, not with tears in her eyes or bitterness in her voice, but with a calm, peaceful clarity that only comes from decades of reflection. She sits quietly, her hands folded gently in her lap, and begins to share the truth that the world has been waiting to hear for so long. Why did she never remarry? Why did she spend all these years alone? The answer, she says softly, is simple. Her connection with Elvis was not just romantic. It was something far deeper, something that went beyond the physical world. It was spiritual, unbreakable, the kind of bond that does not fade with time or distance or even death. People often think of their relationship as tragic. A young girl who fell in love with a superstar, only to be broken by the weight of his fame and demons. But Priscilla does not see it that way. Yes, there was pain. Yes, there were struggles. Yes, there were moments when she thought she could not go on. But through it all, Elvis remained the love of her life, not because he was perfect, not because their marriage was easy, but because he touched a part of her soul that no one else ever could. He saw her when she was just a shy teenager. He trusted her with his fears, his dreams, his darkest moments, and in return, she gave him a love that was pure, unconditional, and entirely real. She explains that marriage, for her, was never something she needed again. Not because she was afraid, not because she was damaged, but because she had already experienced it fully, deeply, completely. She had loved someone with every piece of herself. She had built a home with him, raised a daughter with him, stood by him through storms that would have destroyed most people. And even though their marriage ended on paper, even though they went their separate ways, that connection never truly broke. It just transformed into something quieter, something that lived beneath the surface of everyday life. Priscilla speaks about loyalty, not the kind that chains you to the past, but the kind that honors what was real. She believes that some bonds transcend time and death, that true love does not disappear just because someone is no longer physically present. She carried Elvis with her through every stage of her life. When she raised their daughter, she saw him in Lisa Marie's eyes. When she made decisions about his legacy, she thought about what he would have wanted. When she faced challenges, she drew strength from the memories of the boy who once held her hand and promised her the world. After Elvis passed away, Priscilla could have walked away. She could have built a new life far from the spotlight, far from the constant reminders of what she had lost. But she did not. Instead, she chose to honor him. She took on the enormous responsibility of preserving his legacy, not just for the world, but for herself. Graceland, the mansion that had once been both her prison and her palace, became her mission. It was falling into disrepair, drowning in debt, at risk of being sold and forgotten. But Priscilla would not let that happen. She fought to keep it alive, turning it into a place where fans could come and feel close to the man they loved. But more than that, she kept it as a sacred place of remembrance, a place where his spirit still lived. She visits his grave often, not with sadness, but with a quiet reverence. She stands there in the meditation garden, surrounded by the statues and flowers, and she speaks to him softly, gently, as if he is still listening, and in her heart she believes he is. She tells him about their daughter, about their grandchildren, about the world that has changed so much since he left. She tells him that she still thinks of him, still loves him, still feels his presence in moments when she needs him most. Even now, after all these years, Elvis is not a distant memory. He is woven into the fabric of her life. She sees him in the music that still plays on the radio. She feels him in the quiet moments when she is alone with her thoughts. She carries him in the way she moves through the world, with grace, with strength, with a quiet dignity that comes from having loved and lost something extraordinary. People ask her if she has regrets, if she wishes things had been different, and she always answers the same way: no, she would not change a thing. Because every moment, even the painful ones, shaped who she is. Every tear, every laugh, every sleepless night was part of a love story that most people only dream of, and she is grateful for it. Grateful that she got to experience that kind of connection, even if it came with a price. Priscilla has lived a full life. She has built a career, raised children, created a legacy of her own, but through it all, she has remained loyal to the one love that defined her. Not because she was stuck in the past, but because that love was so profound, so real, that nothing else could ever compare. She does not need another marriage. She does not need another partner. She already had hers, and he is with her still. What do you think about Priscilla's confession? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, like, share, and subscribe to this channel for more celebrity gist. Before you go, watch the other videos on your screen.